Welcome back to the Shades of Blue Soccer Show video pandemic home edition. Mike Coon's here with me. Mike, how you doing?
Good, Thad. How are you?
Not too bad. See, we have to say that to pretend we haven't already talked before we started recording. Okay, so I'm not so good with this stuff. Game last night, we figured we should get together and talk about it. Good, bad, fun, not so much fun at times. Any quick first reactions?
It was a great 60 minutes. 60 minutes of the game, we looked as good, if not better, than any team that I've seen watching the tournament so far. Fluid in attack, moving the ball around. Minnesota looked like they weren't even out on the field. At times, it looked like Melia could have taken a nap, at least in the first half, with how little of the ball in Sporting's half Minnesota had. Then, I mean, Sporting let Minnesota hang around. Gotti Kinda missed a couple chances. Shelton missed a couple chances. Gerso missed a couple chances. I don't really think Polito had much in the way of chances to miss, but there were a number of chances that Casey had to really put away. Should have been 2-3-0 at halftime and let them hang around the entire time. Then you get, you let Minnesota back into the game around the 60th minute, and things just kind of went downhill from there.
Yeah, I was actually thinking it should have been 2 or 3-0 before Shelton even had that opportunity. Yeah, I know Polito had 3 shots last night, but none on goal. I don't remember any of those being in the first half though. But I could be wrong. There probably was, because he had the one free kick that he tried to kill Aha.
Yes, the one into the wall. Yeah.
Yeah. So there was at least that one. I know I saw like several people complaining about Gerso last night, but Gerso had his good and bad also, like everybody else, but he actually had no shots.
The thing I think with Gerso was the big thing was the chance at the beginning of the second half when him and Shelton when he got played in behind the defense, and it was him and Shelton 2-on-1 with just Tyler Miller back there. And I'm not really sure what Gerso was trying to do there. It almost looked like he was trying to cross it initially and then didn't get around the ball at all, and it turned into a really bad shot looking thing, basically.
Yeah, that's his right foot passing while running. His left foot passing was not too bad last night. Maybe it was not perfect at times, but it was pretty decent. But yeah, that right foot pass, no. We need to keep him on
that was just really, really ugly to watch right then. So I think that's the main part of it. I think honestly everybody had attacking wise. Again, those first 60 minutes, they couldn't be stopped. Minnesota just looked poor. There was so much space between Minnesota's center backs and Dotson and Grey Goose in the middle, in their midfield, that it was shocking how much space Kinda and Espinoza were able to find in that little pocket. That it's frustrating thinking about it, how Sporting didn't exploit it more in the first half.
I rewatched most of the first half today, and it was quite enjoyable. It was watching them spread the ball around, pass around. When if Minnesota even had a thought of pressing high, they just passed around until their line of their pressing line. I'm trying to think of the right term, but their line of interaction or whatever it is kept backing up because they knew they couldn't press because they were just getting passed around. And when they would get bunkered in far enough, then they would pass around until they just found the right opening to get somebody free. And some of it was just sucking guys out of the midfield. They were making beautiful runs and doing so much right, except for putting that ball in the net.
Yeah, can't argue with any of what you said. I mean, that's exactly how the first half went. It wasn't. I mean, you look at it the day after and you see all these memes of, like, I think one I saw on Reddit that kind of made me chuckle was this scene from Pirates of the Caribbean right at the beginning where Jack Sparrow is talking to one of the British guards, and the British guy is like, "You are by far the worst pirate I've ever heard of," and he says, "But you have heard of me." And the meme was, "That was by far the worst win I've ever seen," and then it was the next picture, and it's like, "But it was a win." And I mean, wins happen ugly, and I mean, Minnesota wasn't in the game for the first hour, but it was the complete opposite the last 30 minutes.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm going to go back to the Jerso thing for just a second. I think part of the complaints that people had about Jerso was that they heard Twellman say Jerso when it was actually Kinda making the bad shot. Because I counted 3 chances in the first 17 minutes for Kinda. Polito passed to him and he had the breakaway and he shot like way early. He should have taken at least one more touch before shooting. Jerso crossed one across the box that went right past Kinda and I think Shelton on the far post. I mean, Kinda made kind of a lunging effort at it, but if he'd have been just a little bit quicker, that would have been a toe poke into the net. And then there was, I wrote it down, Polito to Espinoza to Zusi to Kinda. And on a great run, he made a great run in through the defense. It was a point blank shot that he just sent way off into nowhere land. And I'm pretty sure on 2 of those, they called Kinda Jerso. So I think that may have been why a couple of people thought Jerso was terrible at shooting last night. Now, moving on a little bit, the Shelton goal. What was your impression on that?
I mean, it was a really great break. Really one of the few chances Minnesota really got forward in the half, and Sporting just it was perfect counterattacking soccer, basically. I mean, quickly got the ball to Polito, who made a great turn and played the ball through to Shelton, and he took the rest of the length of the field. Now, you can question what Miller was trying to do in that situation as the goalkeeper. I know what he was trying to do. He was anticipating the cross, but he overcommitted to the anticipation and just completely left the near post wide open. That I mean, Shelton almost could have walked it into the goal instead of shooting it. With how much he overcommitted to that.
I know, a lot of people said that Miller made a huge mistake on that. I'm going to give a little bit of credit to Shelton on that. I've been watching like the replay because I've had access to the MLS videos, and I've been watching like every version of every different angle of that shot just because I had to find something positive, right? When Shelton took the touch, there was I think he only took like 3 touches. I mean, or maybe 4 total, but the touch before the shot, he actually twisted his hips just a little bit like he was going to come around on it and make the cross. Miller, I think he'd stood up a little bit and started to like be prepared for that possibility, but as soon as Shelton made that little bit of a twist, Tyler moved. And Shelton touched it with the outside of his foot and kept it going towards the near post instead of making that cross with the inside of his foot. So I'm going to give some credit to Shelton on that. And I can try that. I don't know if we could play that video on here and it'd be worthwhile, but I'm going to cut that video and see if I can highlight where he did that.
And I'm not trying to take anything away from what Shelton did in that situation. I'm just, in my opinion, while Shelton may have done well there, I think it's more blame on Miller in that situation because
he committed a little too early.
Yes, exactly.
But I do think he read off of Shelton. So I mean, it's kind of like a quarterback looking off a defender and throwing the other side.
Yeah.
But I just think it's something that I don't think Shelton will get the credit for. Is why I'm trying to highlight that. I'm not saying Miller was innocent in that at all, but I'm trying to find good things.
Well, I mean, well, it's not like I don't think I've said a poor thing yet about
Oh
the
no,
game. I mean,
no, you have not.
well, you were just saying that you were trying to find good stuff to talk about. I mean, we've spent the first 10 minutes of this talking about the good stuff of the game. We barely we haven't even touched what happened from the 60th minute on, basically.
I don't know if we really want to.
I think we kind of have to. I mean,
Yes.
it kind of affected the result of the game and the next game, basically. Basically.
All right. So, what went wrong with Tim?
Well, I don't think you can start with the red card. I mean, you have to go back to basically around the hour mark. I mean, things started going downhill basically, yeah, at the hour mark. I mean, the 64th minute is when Minnesota had what looked like the tying goal, scored by Ethan Finley, and I believe it was Molino that was offside on that and had the goal ruled out by VAR in the end. And not even, I think it was like a minute after the VAR check, the Minnesota then hit the crossbar in like the 68th minute. So, I mean, it was, those right there were the big, I guess, warning signs for Sporting that, hey, we're starting to lose our grip on the game. And I think that was the big turning point of the game. Few minutes after the crossbar, Vermes made his first sub, bringing in Russell, but then and then we had the red card incident with Melia in the 74th, basically a minute after Russell had come into the game.
And so he had to make his second of 3 potential sub opportunities right at that point.
Yeah, and I was unhappy with the decisions by Vermes. I know I shouldn't be, because I mean, how long has Vermes been coach, and how long have we talked about his substitution strategies in conversations and podcasts, on Twitter, wherever. So I mean, it shouldn't be surprising, but last night it was incredibly frustrating to see his substitution strategy. I understand the sub of taking Kinda off, but at the same time, I almost would have offset it by also pulling out either Shelton or Polito and putting in another midfielder in place of Kinda there. And then you then run a 4-3-2 basically, with where you then have the 1 point forward, which is either Polito or Shelton, whichever one you don't pull off, and then you have Russell sitting behind them, and then you have the midfield trio of Espinoza, Elie, and I guess in this situation, Busio would be the midfielder that I would have brought in for Polito or Shelton in that case. So it's frustrating that he didn't make a second corresponding move to help keep the midfield in that situation.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that Polito was dropping back enough that he was almost a midfielder at times anyway. And I'm not sure how much Johnny was dropping back in that situation. Because I know he doesn't have the fitness to be doing a ton of running at this point, which is why he didn't start. But I don't disagree. I mean, I was a little surprised that with the ability to make 5 subs, and I know Peter will talk about how he doesn't want to interrupt the consistency of the flow of the game and how well everything's working, and it was working up until close to that point. But it was still a moment where it seemed like they started to die out, and I know that was talked about long before this tournament ever started, that's potential when you get into the last half of the game for teams to start dying out.
Well, and Vermes even mentioned that, which is another thing that, yeah, which I guess in the grand scheme of things, is what makes it more frustrating that he didn't make those other 3 subs until after Minnesota had equalized, until after they'd scored the goal to make it 1-1. He talked a lot about the fitness and the lack of fitness after basically a second off season. And then to not see him use his third sub opportunity between the 80th and 90th minute is what frustrates me the most, even though it is Vermes and we know that his sub strategy, because he said, I know my guys aren't fit. And he even said it after the game. His guys weren't ready to play with 10 men. If you know that, you make changes sooner. You had 3 more subs to use. Yes, I understand you didn't have another defensive midfielder on the bench to throw in there, but you had a defender. You could have thrown in Reed and pushed one of the other center backs into the midfield, or you play a 3-man back line with Martins and Zuzi sitting deeper, and it becomes basically a 3-man back line with 2 wing backs that push up but are still staying home, and it turns into a 5-man back line. There are ways to get around it to keep the defensive shape and give yourself some comfort, because it was a lot of one-way soccer once the red card to Melia happened.
Yeah, I mean, I wish it would have went different, obviously, in that regard. I know that Peter's always taken a lot of criticism over the subbing strategies. I think some of it unfairly, because I think people get into their mind that he didn't sub as much as what he actually did sometimes. But yeah, I just really think last night was a missed opportunity to have some fresh legs to keep the defense more solid. So, no doubt about it.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, you get the entire situation in stoppage time with the 2 goals there. That was just a lot of tired legs out there from a lot of guys who had run themselves into the ground, basically.
All right. Now to the Tim moment. I mean, it's one of those, like, you're obviously wanting to prevent a goal at all costs, but at the same time, it may have cost 2 games.
Yeah, as somebody who played goalie, I understand what Tim was doing there, what Melia was doing there. At the same time, I don't think it was a huge threat. I don't think there was a need to come out all the way out of the box to claim that ball or to attempt to claim that ball. I think with where the ball was headed, there was not going to be a great chance on goal, and if there was, it was a low percentage chance. It was going to have to be a really well struck shot to beat Melia from that position. So I don't think he had to come for it. I really don't.
Yeah, and I wonder how much of that is just that there hasn't been actual game action, since March, and maybe just misreading that from that aspect of it. I mean, I'm not trying
Let
to
me also Yeah, let me also say that I have no problem with the red there. That was in my opinion, that was a clear red card. It was a denial of a goal scoring opportunity. There is no such thing as last man. So the fact that Puncic had gotten behind him and was going to cover the line doesn't matter. The only argument that I would even hear for it is that Melia coming out to challenge for it was pushing Schoenfield, I think is who it was for Minnesota, just would have pushed him so far wide that the opportunity was not there anymore for it to be a clear goal scoring opportunity. That's the only argument I could hear for it, and even that is very flimsy.
Well, and Puncic being back there is not a last man thing as much as there was a cover back there. So that is part of the whole dog so portion, though, is if position of other defenders, so that it's not the last man thing, but it is that there's a potential covering so that it's not as much of an obvious goal scoring. Yes, it
Yes,
was going a little bit wide.
and that's kind of what plays into the one argument I could hear for it is by the time he would have fully rounded Melia and gotten turned on goal, Puncic would have been able to have been turned around and ready to face that whatever shot on the line. Basically, that's the only argument. And even then, like I said, it's flimsy. I had no problem with the red card to Melia there.
I didn't have a problem with it being red, but in the next game there was a similar thing where the goalie got a yellow.
That was in the box, though.
Yes, but it was also another one where the ball was going even wider, I believe. But I'm just saying it was a similar situation, and in that regard, I think if they'd have given Tim a yellow, I don't think I'd have had much complaint about it. But giving Tim the red, I don't have any complaint about it either.
Yeah, and that's fair. But you got to remember, with it being in the box, there is no longer the double jeopardy of the red and the penalty kicks. So
right.
If it's in the box and if he makes a soccer play on the ball, it has to be a yellow card, because they will not give, if they make a soccer play I think it was Irwin going for the ball, trying to dive at the ball at the attacker's feet, was a soccer play and therefore does not fit under the double jeopardy rule, basically. Now, if a defender had handballed it in the box, then that would be a red card and a penalty kick, because in that case it's not a soccer play. So
correct.
Sorry, now I'm just giving an explanation for the people that may not know the fact that there's not the double jeopardy anymore.
Yeah, that's actually, because even when we were watching the second game, daughter turned to me and says, "They changed that rule, right?" I said, "Yes." Sanchez, 2 goals given up. Poor guy. I don't think he had much chance on one of them, and the other one, he had more chance, but I think he still was not he was hung out to dry.
Yeah, no, let me say I've never been a fan of Sanchez to begin with. He's not a guy who I thought was a great goalkeeper in Chicago. I wasn't that impressed with him in his time there. So I'm coming at this from somebody that wasn't really sold on him as a player. I can't really blame him here in terms of the goals. He was it's incredibly hard to come in as a cold goalie to begin with, because you're not getting a lot of touches anyway. So you're not going to be able to get in sync in the game in the same way a field player will, who's going to touch the ball maybe 30 seconds after they come on when they get played the ball, basically. So I can't really blame him on either of the goals. I'm hoping for better when he comes in from the start and has a full warm up prepared to be the starter coming in. But for me, he has to prove that he's a good goalkeeper, because I've never been sold on him personally.
Yeah, me either. His game earlier this year with Sporting KC2 was not very impressive. His time with Chicago was not super impressive. They were not a very good team at that time anyway. So again, you never know. I really think he was just brought in to be on the bench for him to play, and Pulskamp to be down with Sporting 2 to get his time. So we're going to get into an area where I just want to be very cautious of how I say these things. I don't want to speculate on who does or does not have a positive test for corona. But being that only 2 people on the roster were not on the bench last night, with the third one, I guess, being on his way to Hungary, there's only 3 possibilities, I guess. Botan, he's on his way to Hungary, so I'm not counting him. But Pulskamp or Freeman were probably one of those 2 was the positive corona test while they were there, that caused the consternation the other day. Now, if it was Pulskamp and you have Sanchez there to start, I know there's a pool goalie down there. Think they can bounce him from team to team?
I believe they still can. I know we talked in private and I wasn't really sure, but I took a look at the NYCFC release, because Charlie Lyon is the goalkeeper who's the pool goalie, and the release just said that he would be training with the team, but is not on their roster for the tournament. So it's like any other pool goalkeeper at this point, where he's training with one team but still available to all the teams.
Yeah.
So again, not, as you said, not wanting to speculate, not wanting to place specifics on who we think has the positive test. If it is Pulskamp, then presumably we would have the pool goalkeeper, Leon, on the bench for Friday's game.
Yeah, because that obviously the speculation led to some very incorrect speculation the other day that it was one of the normal starters. And obviously it was not.
Yeah. So we're just covering our bases by not making a claim that we know something that neither one of us knows. We don't know who it is. We have not been given it off the record as a, hey, this is who it is, but don't say anything sort of thing. Neither one of us know who the person is.
No, I mean, I will try to find out, but it's also probably going to be obvious by Thursday. I mean, Friday.
Yeah. It in theory, it should be obvious. Well, maybe. I mean, it could technically still be Barath but we should in theory be able to either know who it is if it is Pulskamp and he is not on the bench, or narrow down one other person basically come Friday.
Yeah, and we may also be able to get it out of Peter on a conference call, but we'll see.
I know that is very iffy territory in terms of, I don't know HIPAA laws, but that would be one of those things that I would personally not want to be the one to ask that.
I know. That's why I'm also very cautious about it. It seems that, and again, it seems like when you're a player for a sports team, you kind of give up some of that HIPAA though, because I mean, they will say player X is out with this injury. Well, I mean, it's not quite the same, but it's still very similar. So I don't know where the line gets drawn with that or how exactly. All I meant was, I'm not going to say, hey, was Pulskamp the one with Corona, but it would be more like.
Any update on how the player's doing, sort of thing.
And do you see the need to pull in a pool keeper to back up just in case? Somebody might ask that. I don't know though, because quite honestly, unless I ask it, I don't know that how many other people would know to ask it. So sometimes there's not a lot of soccer people on the soccer calls.
Yeah, but anyway, one thing I will say, going back to the actual game itself and Sanchez's play, one thing that, thinking about it, that I was disappointed in when he came on, that I don't think would have been, I don't think you can blame on being cold, I guess would be a good way to put it, was how poor his distribution was when he did come into the game, because it was really bad when he came into the game. He was not connecting on much of anything.
I think it was his third or fourth touch, and I turned to daughter. I said, "Hey, he completed a pass."
Yeah. So in that regard, that is one area where I think you can put some blame on him, or be more critical than in terms of the 2 goals that they allowed.
Yeah, definitely. I will give a little bit of benefit of the doubt. Well, it's not so much cold as it is still coming into a kind of a pressure situation, and not having been warm for an hour kind of thing. So I will give him a little benefit of the doubt for a couple of those, but I also don't think he was very good at it earlier this year with the SKC2 game. It might be one of those, which I mean, Sporting doesn't like to do, but go bunch everybody into one area and lob the ball up there and hope that a tall guy gets it.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that, because that's one thing that Minnesota was doing in the first half, and listening to it on the on ESPN and getting the field noise with it, you would hear Adrian Heath or somebody on the bench saying, "Get up for it, Toy." Toy for Mason Toya to go for it, basically. And every time I heard that, I would kind of laugh because he's going up against Punchik or Beasler there, and both of them are still like a head taller than him, basically. I think so. Is every time I hear it, I'm like, I don't know why, but it just stuck with me of why is Minnesota continuing to play the ball in the air like that for their goal kicks? And maybe I'm just used to seeing it played out of the back as much. But then in the second half, I don't remember paying a lot of attention when Mealy was doing it, but when Sanchez was in there, I noticed that Kansas City started doing the same thing where Sanchez was just pumping the goal kicks downfield.
Yeah, obviously that's not his forte. So we will definitely see on Friday what happens.
I've seen people hoping Pulskamp starts. I can't see anybody but Sanchez starting this game, no matter what.
If Pulskamp was healthy, I would actually go with him. But I would also understand why he would not, even if Pulskamp was healthy. Just because that you're putting a young guy into a pressure situation. But I mean, having watched him play for Swope last year, I thought he was the better one out there, like pretty much all the time. I mean, I know it's a little bit different level, but I think he could do it.
Yeah, I mean, I have no doubts that he can do it. I mean, he looked, for a bad Swope Park team last year, he was one of the bright spots in goal.
Yeah, he wasn't perfect, but he was pretty darn good.
Yeah, and I mean, we can talk historically about goalkeepers, but no 18-year-old is going to be a perfect standout goalie. Or if he is, he's going to be somebody who's not playing in MLS right now.
Yeah, he'd be sitting on the bench for some big team.
Probably. So, I mean, in that sense, he has. It's why we signed Sanchez in the first place, when we went with also having Pulskamp in the system and eventually signed as well. It was so Sanchez could be the backup to Melia, and then Pulskamp could spend the entire season with SKC2, more or less, getting the time there.
Yep. So basically another season lost of good loan opportunities at this point.
And this one at least didn't come due to first team injuries, though.
No. Oh man.
And to be fair, technically he could probably Pulskamp could end up with SKC2 once the tournament's over and once Sporting returns to KC, which, depending on how Kansas City does, he could in theory only miss 1 or 2 games with SKC2, because they didn't play last weekend. Their first game is this coming weekend against Indy. So, I mean, they'll still have 14 more games to play in the USL Championship season.
Yeah, and no, he could definitely get a lot of playing time down there still. I mean, and I hope he does, and hope that some of the other young guys do too when they come back. With the game being Sunday, Friday, that's 5 days, essentially. I wonder how many, or if there will be any subs to the starting lineup.
How much do you trust Vermes to actually rotate his team? Because that's another one of those those points with Vermes of especially last year, for example, a lack of rotation with the early crunch of fixtures with the Champions League, and doing not a lot of rotating until they reach the Monterey series.
Yeah.
I would, in a sense, I would hope we maybe see a little bit of rotation, At the same time, I'm not sold that we're going to see it. I think at least this game, I think Vermes will still go with his best available, and then maybe that final Salt Lake game, he looks to switch things up. But I think Friday he'll go with the same or close to the same lineup with maybe one to two changes.
I'll say the over-under on that is probably 0.9. Quite honestly, if he was going to switch up the starters, I'd probably rather him do it for the Colorado game a little bit because they're probably slightly the weaker team than RSL, and they need to win both of those games in order to advance. Hate to say it, but that's the way it goes.
Yeah, no, and that's a fair point that I thought of as well. But with Melia out of the game, and I guess technically, let me rephrase my 1-2. 1-2 outside of Sanchez coming in for Melia.
Right. Yeah, I'm right along with you there.
So, but I think he, at least in the back five in front of Sanchez, I would be surprised if we see any changes. One, because we don't have a natural backup to Ilie on the roster right now with Gutierrez done for the season. So I think Ilie is going to get run to the ground this tournament, unfortunately. You could make a case for Reed getting some time, but I think the four defensive players and four defenders and Ilie, I'll be surprised if they switch.
I do wonder if at some point they try Reed at I was wondering if they would try Reed at a DM kind of role or something like that, because he does have good passing ability from what I understand, at least. But with Botan gone, I kind of doubt that more so now.
Well, because then if he gets hurt, you're left with Graham Smith as the only other defender down there on the roster. So, yeah.
Well, then you move Ilie back. Oh, wait, no.
Yeah. I think, and I know we've discussed this on Twitter because we've had somebody kind of talking to us in our mentions. I do think defensive midfielder needs to be addressed somehow when the secondary window opens up. I think we probably need to get, I'm not saying it needs to be a huge signing. They just need some depth there. Ilie, especially if the rest of the season happens, it's going to be a condensed schedule. Ilie is going to need some games off. So I think the way you do that is you get, and I have no names in my head, but you get somebody with some MLS experience or a low-level international that can do a game or two if you need him to. But I think that's a big hole in this team right now is the lack of depth behind Ilie. I mean, if Ilie goes down Friday, who plays the number 6? If he goes down with an injury, who plays the number 6? That's the only name that comes to my mind. And the problem there is not that I don't like Kuzain, but he hasn't played an MLS game since 2018. I mean, it's been almost 2 years since he played an MLS game.
Your options become, I would say, not necessarily in this order, but Kuzain, Reed, Felipe Hernandez, dropping Espinoza back and bringing in Busio. None of those are perfect solutions for various reasons, but I mean, I think those are your options.
I mean, I think you almost have to stylistically change the way the team plays a little bit if Ilie is not there. I really think you have to look at that. If Ilie cannot go for a game and there's nobody that you can put there.
There's one player I can think of that's in MLS that I would like them to go get. Of course, I don't know what his condition is right at this moment, but it would be to go get Musa back. I don't know what it would cost them with knowing all the, everything, but he played that role for Swope. I thought he did pretty good at it. And I think he could step in, and he's not as good a passer as Ilie is at his best, but he has more of a physical presence and more speed. He was a smart player. I wouldn't mind seeing him come back as a stopgap until you could find another player. But again, I don't know Minnesota would allow it.
Yeah, well, and they just signed him, so I would kind of be a little surprised if they would make a move in that regard. Not that he's playing anymore, but Eric Alexander was the first name on my list when I was thinking about an MLS level player that wouldn't be super expensive that you could bring in. But I don't know. It's something that I think needs to be addressed. August 12th, I think, somewhere around there is when the secondary window now opens, if I remember right. It's something that I think needs to be addressed because I think it's something that's a hole in this team right now.
No doubt. I completely agree. What do you think the chances against Colorado?
Honestly, I didn't watch a whole lot of their game last night. I watched bits and pieces while I was putting together some of my stat stuff, but I didn't watch a ton. I like Robin Fraser as a coach. I like what he had done with Colorado towards the end of last season, but they didn't look great against RSL last night in the parts of the game that I did watch. I thought RSL looked the much better team against them, and I don't know. I don't know what to expect out of Colorado. I don't know if to expect the team that they were last night or the team that was 2-0 so far heading into this game. But then again, the same thing could be said for us. Which team are you going to get? The team that has looked good for 2.5 games, or the team that played the last half hour of last night's game?
Well, yeah, if they can move the 60 minutes to 70 minutes and then hold on. Quite honestly, if they could have just scored those opportunities that they created, it would have not have mattered at all. I mean,
No, well, and scorings. I mean, that's a tale as old as sporting. Basically, is our struggles to score goals has. It's not a new issue for us. Now, granted, it wasn't the first 2 games, and you would hope that Polito is going to get some more space and get opportunities to put some balls in the net in the next game. But I mean, it's not like we've always been a great goal scoring team.
yeah. Now, like I know last night I like, oh, that's so 2019, but there are reasons that last night was like 2019, but there's also reasons it was not like 2019. Yes, they didn't score when they needed to, and they gave up goals late, so that's very much like 2019. But the quality of chances they created was not like 2019. That was more 2018 because they had a couple of games in 2018 when they scored out the yin yang, that they didn't win by 3 goals. So I think it was much more like one of those games where, but it still is there's that little bit of worry that late in the game, one mistake and the team will deflate. That's pretty much not exactly what happened last night, but there's still that worry. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, the little seed of doubt of, oh, here we go again. Here's 2019 part 2 again. Last night, the last 30 minutes definitely had that creep in. But at the same time, I mean, most of it happened down a man in their first competitive game in 4 months. So, I mean,
Yes.
well, and let's not even say competitive game. Let's just say, I mean, because it wasn't even like I mentioned earlier how it was like a second off season. The difference was they didn't have any semi-competitive scrimmages
Nope.
in between the game against Houston and last night. I mean, yeah, you have inter squad games, but I mean, those are going to have a different feel to them than even games in the Desert Diamond Cup when you're not when you know you're not going to play a full game, but you need to get some time in. So it's a different situation. I'm I'm not concerned that it's 2019 all over again yet. I want to see a full game, another full game happen, and I think they'll do better come Friday against Colorado.
You know, every year when the season starts, and no matter how the first two games goes, Peter's always talking about, you got to wait 10 games to see what kind of team you really have. Now we got to do it all over again. Hopefully we get 10 games to tell what this team's like. And I think the biggest difference for like a little bit of criticism for not scoring last night is they never had a $9 million player. That and Kinda and subs and waning at the end of the game leads to the criticism. But even the best teams don't score every game. I mean, you can also look to the Bundesliga and the Premier League, and the better teams are not winning all their games, even though they should, because they're totally inconsistent. Everybody's inconsistent right now. It's because it's hard to maintain that consistency with no home games, the travel being weird, and everything else added into it. So I would expect some of the good teams to lose when you don't expect it, and some of the bad teams to win when you don't expect it. But that will make for an exciting tournament.
Yep.
All right. Anything else we should discuss today, Mike?
Not a lot else news-wise, sporting related to talk about, really.
No. All right, man. Thanks for joining. I'm not really good at wrapping this stuff up like Cody is, but thanks for watching, and hopefully we'll have another video out after the next game. Thanks, Mike.
Yep. Always a pleasure, Thad.